In lesson number 3, we're going to look at working with baselines. Now, baselines have been around in the vSphere product for a very long time. In fact, since the initial release of Update Manager. Okay? Remember that Lifecycle Manager is the feature that replaces the older Update Manager that had been in the product until version 6.7. Let's have a look. So we'll look at baselines and baseline groups, and we'll look at the different types of baselines. And then we're going to look at how we can actually create our own custom baselines, and then how we update hosts using baselines themselves. One of the things I want to mention here is that part of the process of upgrading an environment from an older version of vSphere to a newer version of vSphere is the order in which you do the upgrades. And the order will always start with upgrading vCenter first. Okay? As long as you have at least version 6.5 on your ESXi hosts, okay, you'll start by upgrading vCenter. And at this point, you'll be able to use Lifecycle Manager to upgrade your ESXi hosts to whatever version you want to run. Hopefully it's version 7.0, but it should be really at least the current version of 6.7, okay? Anyway, until you get to 7.0 and you have the choice between baselines and image depots, you will be using baselines and baseline groups to upgrade your ESXi hosts. So there are several different types of baselines. And the baselines that are there by default include critical host patches, non-critical host patches, and host security patches. We can also create baselines that include an entire ESXi version, or we can include baselines that include third-party software as well. Okay? Now, you can then take these baselines and add them to what we call a baseline group, which includes only one baseline per type. Okay? So one of each type of baseline can then be created to a baseline group, and then you can patch your ESXi hosts against the entire group of baselines if you like. So we can create a new baseline or edit existing new baselines through the new baseline wizard. And we can create what we call fixed patch baselines. So I can set up a new baseline that includes only the patches that I choose to apply. I can create a dynamic patch baseline, which will include all of the patches that VMware believes are of the same type of the baseline that you create. Okay? Typically, and I'll go back one slide, when we have critical and non-critical host patch baselines there as defaults, these are dynamic patch baselines. And anytime VMware comes up with a new patch for ESXi, that new patch will then automatically be included among those baselines. We can also create host extension baselines that will include software that you might choose to add. This could be VMware-based software. This could be third-party software. This could be drivers. They all come in the form of zip files that include VMware infrastructure bundles or VIB files that are then copied to the ESXi hosts. Okay? When you build these patch baselines, we can filter the baselines and extensions to find the specific types of patches that you would like to apply to the specific versions of ESXi that you would like to apply them to. So in Lifecycle Manager, I can go to the Baselines menu here and create, if I like, a new baseline. I can create a new baseline or a baseline group. And it brings up a wizard, and it asks me what type of baseline would you like to create, and how would you like to name it. You'll note also here that there are these 3 predefined ones, and then there's here a baseline group that we have also created manually. So as I build a baseline, I give it a name and a description. I'm going to tell it it's either an upgrade baseline, which will include ISO images, a patch baseline, which will include zip files that are collected by Lifecycle Manager as it reaches out to the online software depots, okay? Or we can include extensions that allow me to manually import these zip files and things like that. And then I can choose the ESXi version that these patches will apply to. As I continue through the wizard, I can determine whether or not I want to create a dynamic patch baseline or a fixed or manual baseline, okay? If I choose to select patches automatically, I can select it to also automatically update the baseline as we learn more information. I can choose what patch vendor I want to include, what product they are for, what level of severity should this baseline include. So do I want it only to have critical patches, or do I want to include all the patches, for example? And then what category? Are they security? Are they bugs? Are they enhancements and things like that? Okay. I can also choose the release date. Only give me patches since last month, okay, that were released since last month, if I choose to do that. Here is where I select patches manually. It will give me a list of all of the patches that are in vCenter's database, and I can simply select the patches that I want to include in the baseline. Now at this point, I have a baseline that I can compare my ESXi hosts against. And if the hosts do not have all of the patches and updates that are included in the baseline, then Lifecycle Manager will inform me that your host needs to be remediated. It doesn't match the baseline, and we need to get the level of the software in the host up to the level of the software that you have created in this baseline. We do this by first selecting the host or the cluster that you would like to compare with the baseline, and we'll head over to the Updates tab. At this point, we can see that we've selected a cluster here. Okay, we can see that there are 3 hosts in the cluster, and then 3 of these 3 are actually compliant. Okay, but it may say we haven't checked, or it may say that they're non-compliant. At any rate, we can check compliance against the baseline, okay, and we can schedule a check of compliance, and then we can run a pre-check on remediation that tells us whether or not we believe the remediation or that the patch will actually be successful based on other software that might be installed on the ESXi host. Is everything compatible with the patches that we would like to apply, for example? Now, which baseline am I comparing the host against? Well, that is down here where we select attached baselines. We can select the baselines. We'll get a list of the baselines that are available. We'll select which ones we need to attach. At this point, we can then check compliance and then stage or remediate immediately. Staging copies the patches to ESXi and waits for you to remediate. Remediating immediately does all of that in one step by first sending the host into maintenance mode, copying the patches over, and then applying the patches, rebooting the ESXi host if necessary. So as we determine that the host is non-compliant with the baseline, we may want to do a remediation pre-check. Okay? It helps us to determine whether or not the remediation will be successful. And it warns us if there is anything that we need to do in order to properly remediate. In this case, a cluster of ESXi host. It says that, you know what, there is an issue that might prevent remediation in this example. It says admission control will be disabled, and admission control might prevent vMotion from proceeding in downtime during the patching. In other words, I've got a 3-host cluster here, and if I have an outage while one of those hosts is in maintenance mode, then I probably will not be able to restart all of the VMs, especially if I have reservations. I probably cannot run, in other words, all of the VMs on a single ESXi host. So it warns me about this, okay? It's a warning, not a critical alert or an error in this case. And it says these 3 hosts have those issues, okay? And it gives us a list of suggested actions, and I can click on these and choose and see what actions it might want me to take before I actually attempt to remediate. So this is the remediation pre-check. At this point, if I believe that the remediation will be successful, I can go ahead and remediate the hosts. Upgrades, updates, patches, all that are listed from the compliance check will be applied to the hosts. Okay, I can perform it now or at a later date. And then all of the hosts that are being remediated have to go into maintenance mode. It will do it one at a time unless you tell it otherwise. If you have enough hosts to run the load, if say 2 or 3 of those hosts are all being remediated simultaneously, it will allow you to do that if you choose, okay? Like it says here, the hosts are sequential one at a time, and it will disable admission control during the remediation process. So be aware of that. If there are failures, disabling admission control will attempt to restart any VMs that are there, but if it is not able to meet the reservations that are set on those VMs, then in all likelihood the VM won't restart. So just be aware of that. How often we have host failures during an update process? Well, that's kind of like, wow, that's really bad luck when that happens. So hopefully it doesn't, we don't have any physical errors in the hosts right at that time. Okay, so that's the basics of remediating using baselines through Lifecycle Manager. When we come back, we're going to look at the new images features of Lifecycle Manager. Be right back. Talk to you soon.